I'm going to now take my head of department hat off, and I'm going to talk to you from somebody who I've been on Neuroscience and Mental Health panel for the Medical Research Council. So for those of you who are new to Britain, the main funding bodies for biomedical research in the UK would be the Medical Research Council, which is funded from the government. They also have another pot of money which the Department of Health, which is another government pot, supports through the NIHR, the National Institutes for Health Research, but the MRC is the historically long one to which many of us have gone for many, many years of our careers for fellowships and grants. We are very fortunate in Britain, and that's why we do so well in the biomedical research area, because we also have the Wellcome Trust, who fund equivalent quantities, again, largely in these areas. So this is why we do so well, to be frank, in neurosciences and in biomedical research, because we have actually quite a fantastic amount of money to apply for and get. But that, of course, means that a lot of critical mass builds up around that. A lot of people, wonderful people like you, come from around the world to Britain to work. So even though there's more money, there's more demand, and we'll go through that and the attrition rate. Heidi will give you more of a focus, as I understand it, Heidi, on the Wellcome side of funding. I'll focus more on the MRC. I'm now not deputy chair, I'm now on council for the MRC, so I have more of a governance structure role for the MRC, so I can give you some insight there about how funding's going and what we're doing. But I thought I'd just walk you through the nuts and bolts of what my experience has been, both as a person, as a reviewer, as a person sitting on the panel, as a person that has mentored people, as a person that has written grants, and there's lots of pros and negatives in the context of writing grants. So hopefully this will be helpful, and there'll be probably areas which we will overlap, myself, Heidi and Masood, in things that we're saying, but that's not a bad thing, because it means it will drive at home what the key messages are that you need to do. So let's start with just what the key elements are for success in writing a grant. The first thing is you've got to have a clear hypothesis. I am staggered still at how often people don't have a hypothesis for the particular grant, or even the paper that they're writing. At the end of the day, you are trying to persuade somebody who has a very small amount of money available to give you that money to pursue your idea. And if you are not clear on what your question is and what your idea is, you're not going to convince them. So you really do have to think about it as a pitch. It's a sales pitch to a certain extent, obviously built on excellence and the likelihood that you are able to deliver on that idea. But it is really surprising to me how people go quite late in their careers before they've been told or trained that it all starts with having a really good hypothesis. And I think part of what the tool builders that Catch is developing for you to practice on will help you think about your science in this way of creating a hypothesis. So often it starts with, again, a really solid understanding of your subject area. You need to, again, convince me. And don't forget, these panels are often multidisciplinary in their nature, so you'll have a couple of experts, but on the whole, you've just got people who are broadly from the neurosciences area, but we know a thing or two. So you're going to need to persuade me that you have command of your subject area, that you know the literature, that you've identified what the key missing question is that's a really interesting one, that is a gap in our knowledge that we need to pursue. And that could be something that's quite blue sky. And what I mean by that, there's lots of different words for that. So it could be very fundamental / discovery / basic. So those are three different words for the same idea. But at this point, it's just understanding something for understanding its sake, with a hope that that might be useful. But really, there's such value in just obviously understanding the biology and discovering things that we recognise that if we don't have that going on in parallel, ultimately we'll end up with nothing to translate. So although there's a lot of common parlance about translation and the importance of that, and we must be more directed with translational research, there also absolutely, I can assure you, is an awareness that if we do not maintain our fundamental basic discovery science, we will have nothing to translate in a few years' time. So don't be worried about that. I know a lot of young people feel they've got to change their style of research and they've got to go more translational when actually they're really interested in the blue sky stuff. You'll see some figures in a minute that will convince you blue sky discovery science is still very, very well supported. So the gap in the knowledge can be of one of those ilks, and it's probably a good idea to be quite clear. One, what drives you as a scientist? What type of scientist do you want to be? Do you want to be more of a blue sky basic one, or do you want to be more of a translational or more of a clinical? You can be a little bit of both, and you can change throughout your career. So sometimes I go quite basic, sometimes I go quite translational. Sometimes I've had a little bit of both. And again, that can vary throughout your career. But identifying where the gap is, characterising it in terms of where does it fit, because this is going to guide you as to what type of grant application you're going to go for. So most of these granting agencies will have programme managers who are, again, really cognizant, because they've seen a lot, of what is successful, what the sort of current climate is, what's being funded. And their job is to communicate with you, the stakeholders, and guide you, and give you advice, give you feedback, tell you what it is you're doing. So don't be shy about engaging with the Wellcome and MRC, with those programme managers, and getting that feedback from them, and saying to them, I've got this germ of an idea. This is a really key question that's a missing piece of knowledge in my subject area. I think I'd like to pursue it, but I'm not quite sure if it's too basic for that particular panel, or it's too basic for that scheme. Because outside of just the regular funding project grant type boards that we have, there's all these other schemes that are available that come up and down in the research councils. The programme managers will be familiar with them. So again, trawling through the websites can be complex. We are going to, as part of the staff development plan, try and make it easier for you to identify what new schemes are coming up. But just pick up the phone, ring them up, and they can say, probably not suitable for a board, but actually we've got this new scheme that's to pump prime discovery science in this area. And we haven't even got it on the website yet, but you should know it's coming out next month and go for it. That's the sort of information you get. So start to develop relationships with the programme managers, because they can really guide you and give you a heads up about what's coming. So talk to those programme managers. After you've got your hypothesis sorted, preliminary data. Again, another key thing that basically you're not going to get a grant, I can tell you, I'm mostly going to focus on project grants going to the 3 cycles per year of board meetings, if you don't have preliminary data. It's just essential. So every grant that gets funded, I can guarantee if I picked any of them up for the past 10 years, they will have preliminary data in there. Why do you want to have preliminary data? Basically, the type of data you want to put in is data that's really tantalising. It's data that's going to get everybody all excited on the panel that, ooh, clearly there's something in this. You don't want to put enough data that completely statistically supports your hypothesis, because then you've actually done the grant and not going to give you the money. And I say that because I worked in America for a couple of years, and that actually is how NIH grants are funded. You virtually send them the paper of what you've written. I am being recorded here, but maybe it's changed. But back in my day when I was there, you virtually sent the preprint of the paper you'd done to get the money. Everything was funded sort of almost retrospectively, because it was sort of required to be so safe that it was a guaranteed idea. They almost wanted everything in there. It was really mad. Whereas here, it's a lot more closer to still room for things changing or going wrong. But again, it's not going to be possible generally for you to get a grant unless you've got some preliminary data that shows them you're probably on the right track. Your hypothesis or your concept is probably right, because I've already got some data that shows I can do the methodology, and that hints at the fact that I'm probably on the right track, and that gives them a sense of excitement that it's a now or never opportunity to fund. Because the other issues we have when it is difficult and challenging, when you're sort of at the edge and which ones we're going to go for, then strategic priorities, other sorts of criteria will have to come to play. And if it's a question that this is a really competitive area, but we are world leading in it, and this group is the world leading group, and we must maintain that position in the world. So we better not give it them now, because that will let them drop behind the competition. These are the things that, again, we're all scientists on the panels, we all know the game and how hard it is to work. So giving them a sense that there's excitement around this, this is really, this is the time to fund it, it can't wait a year, it can't wait half a year, it's now or never. That's how you want to portray the data and how you're trying to sort of get them excited about that. Clear methods. Again, a lot of grants that go down is because we're just not sure what you've done. You've not done power calculations, you've not convinced us that you've thought through what the hurdles might be in the methodology. And that's my other point, is don't be frightened of admitting that there are tough hurdles to overcome, and that there will be expected challenges. We're not fools on the panel, we're all pretty experienced researchers, we all know that things go wrong, we all know that there can be unexpected events, so there's no point trying to pretend it's otherwise. Honesty and authenticity sells every time. Be honest, be authentic, be realistic with what it is. So you're not going to fool anyone on the panel. have contingencies in place. Identify where you think there might be a particular hurdle or challenge in that methodology, particularly if your grant has one set of experiments contingent upon which the next set of experiments are going to go. Well, what's the plan if that first set don't work out? You can't do the second set. Meanwhile, we've given you the money for 3 years. So what's the plan? So you've got to, again, convince us that you have the maturity and the wisdom to be responsible with this money that we're going to give you, that you recognise there's going to be some challenges, you've got some contingencies in place, you can mitigate them, and that should it not be, and it really is a sort of go-no-go decision, how are you going to change plan the next set of experiments? So again, don't be frightened. A lot of young people want to make out this absolutely perfect. We're all, again, we're all scientists, we all know that stuff goes wrong, so the more honest and open you can be, and the more you can convince us that you've really thought through the chess game that it is when you're doing experiments and all the different ways that it can play out, the more you are going to impress them that you are going to be successful, because you've got contingencies in place and you're going to mitigate, and the more likely you will get the funding. Okay, so 3 really clear things. Seems really obvious, you probably knew this, I hope that you would know this. I'm just reminding you that it is surprising how many grants come to board without those 3 elements in place. But every single grant that gets funded will have them in place really clearly. So don't underestimate the importance of that, okay? Build up the grant in that way. And I'm sure, Heidi, you'll probably be emphasising these issues again. Be realistic, okay? There's not an unlimited amount of money. So having said that, you know, we have this fantastic opportunity in Britain because we have the Wellcome Trust alongside the MRC and the NIHR, as well as obviously at this point availability to all the EU money, there still isn't unlimited amounts of money. So a lot of grant requests for money will come in, it will go through a funnel, and there'll be a very small percentage back. So if we take 15-16 data from the MRC for neurosciences and mental health, which is one of the 4 boards, as you know, there are 3 rounds of board meetings a year, and March, July and November pretty much, and the total number of applications over the whole year, over those 3 boards, will be for neuroscience mental health about 271 project grants coming in. Mostly project grants, 3-year grants with a few 5-year program grants. And out of that 271, 50 will be awarded, which is an 18% success rate, which is actually pretty good compared to NIH. I don't know where it's hovering, but certainly a year ago or so it was about 9%. So that is about 47 million. So it's approximately, it was about when I was there, it's about 15 million per grant round we gave out. And generally, going at the top of the funnel was 150, 200 million requests. So each round you'll have about 200 million requests coming in. We will triage, I'll go through the process in a minute, down to about 45 million. And that 45 million will come to board, and then we'll award 50 million of that. So that's the toughness of the filter. So if you're going to come in with a 3-year project grant that's 2.5 million, because you just added everything in, and for the whole of the UK, each round is 14 million, how likely do you think it is you're going to get that at sort of a youngest stage? So you've got to be realistic. There's no right or wrong with what the money is, but certainly people will come in with extraordinary unrealistic expectations of what they think they're going to be funded, with some quite staggering travel requests money, which always gets cut. So be realistic, and again, be honest, be authentic, work out carefully, not at the last minute, 5 days before the grant's due with Maria in Research Services. Give yourself plenty of time to sit down and work out what actually is the money you need. Have you really thought of, and make sure that you actually are asking for everything you need, but you're not overbilling. Okay, because you could, again, I have experience where grants have just become unaffordable for the value for money, because at the end of the day you've got to go with value for money. There's a lot of brilliant grants, you know, we have to triage out fantastic grants. So every one of those is brilliant and fundable, and we can only pick a subset of them. So you've got to be, again, it's just common sense and streetwise about that. Misconceptions. People think, right, won't go to the MRC because they're medical. It's got the word medical in it, and they don't do any fundamental research. Absolutely not true. And they think they've got to only go there with the more translational side of things. And I probably should have mentioned, sorry, BBSRC, it's just that we don't tend to put too many in from this department to BBSRC, but we obviously have that granting body in Britain as well. And we also have the EPSRC for the more physicsy, maths ones, but I'm focusing more on the sort of biomedical ones today. If you look at this graph, it's breaking down again for the MRC, where they split across those 4 wards. If you then broke down across the 4 wards that of course is covering physiology, neuroscience, other areas, population health, what would you classify as underpinning type of research versus mechanisms of disease, detection, screening, prevention of disease, etc. And you will see that the underpinning is 1/4 of it, and then 37 is mechanisms of disease. So a good half of it is basic underpinning mechanisms of biology related to disease. And actually, I mean, this is, again, a pushback from other areas of the community, is that they'd like to see more in some of these other areas that are very much on the more clinical end of prevention, diagnosis, stratification, personalisation. But right now, you can see that that's hefty. So don't be put off. Again, it's a question of don't believe what you just hear out there, and the myths and the misconceptions. Pick up the phone, get to talk to the program manager, look at the data. Everything I'm showing you is available online, and it'll be the case for all the research councils. Become familiar with it, because if you're going to stay in the career, the science, these are going to become, this is the means to the end, You don't sustain an academic career in science unless you bring grants in. It's the fuel that keeps everything going. So the more you can familiarise yourself with the process and accessing the websites, keeping up to date with new schemes that are coming up, I know the figures are not very interesting, but becoming familiar with, well, what are they funding and where does the split come, the more informed you're going to be and the better choices you will make. So the process, what happens? The grant comes in, it goes out to review. And this is a really interesting one, and this is one that's, I'm afraid, a bit disappointing still. The grant managers, the program managers, they spend an extraordinary amount of time getting reviewers and trying to get reviewers to agree to review the grant. And they will generally try to get, anything in excess of 3, 4, 5 reviewers per grant, so that, again, those scores when they come in, which each will have different scales of scoring, it can be across all those different 270 grants that you saw coming in. You can, at best, try and have a good spread of scores, and at least everybody's had the same number of reviewers. That's the dream. The reality is, I'm afraid, like we all know, we're all overswamped with reviewing, and it turns out that it's extraordinarily difficult for them to get reviewers. And they go out to further and further, more maybe disconnected reviewers to the skill of the subject area in order to get a review. And so I still think that's an area that really needs work. I'll be interested to know how it is at the Wellcome. MRC don't pay their reviewers. I don't know whether there are other schemes we could do, but getting people who are, receiving a lot of grant money from the MRC but not willing to do their good citizenship work is disappointing, if I'm honest with you. So the review process is not perfect. It's hard to find reviewers. It's hard to get people who are the right people to review to sign up to review, which means that interpreting the review score as a board member becomes really important, because they can be quite variable in their utility, if I'm honest with you. So some will be obviously fantastic, and some will be not. At this point, we are all blinded. We do not know, us, on the board, who's been asked to review. But they work really hard to try and get as many reviews as they can, but it's not perfect. So I'm telling you this because what happens next after that review comes in is there is a triage meeting where a subset of the panel, I'll come to the panel in a minute, meets, and they will triage, like you saw those grants, down to the 270, down to the 50. So how many can we tolerate over a full day and a half at board? And they will use the reviewers' scores and comments to do that, but they will also use their own judgment. So you will be able to, as a member, override what you see as a low score. At this point, you're still blinded to who that reviewer is, but if you've looked at the grant, you worked with all the grants, you will be able to say, well, I don't agree with that, and actually 5 reviewers gave it a 6, top mark, and there's this one that gave it a 2. And actually their comments are not right, they've misunderstood something or whatever. So be assured that the triage process, it sounds brutal, because it is, that's the definition of triage, but it's not just blindly putting a red line, having averaged the scores. It is interpreted by board members who will go through every single grant and then they will work out again and decide, and things will go above the line, haven't gone through everything below the line because of the scores, and make sure that we bring to board the grants that should be brought to board. But, you know, it's not perfect because of, you know, again, these idiosyncrasies of the review process. And I'm going on about that because at some point and some of you already are, you know, a bit more mature in your grant writing, but I'm just trying to really encourage you as the next generation. Please do, you have to engage in the review process. It's the only way as a community we can survive and actually make sure that we are all supporting each other and best, you know, helping these structures to work efficiently and make sure that we fund the best science.
What do you do when you're in interdisciplinary research and there's a high chance of getting a very good score in that one?
It's highly probable, and you're absolutely right, and that comes down to relying on the fact that you've got a person who's on that panel that has some knowledge and skill that they can override that disparity. If you don't, then I'm afraid a judgment call will have to be made, and you know, mistakes will happen. Yeah.
Does that also mean that everyone in that triage group has read all these?
So they pretty much have, yep. So it's a lot of work, and I'll come at the end about encouraging you to maybe go and observe on the panels, which is possible for you, and eventually becoming and applying to be members of the panels. You generally get asked to go, but you sort of get plucked in to do it. But it's really good. I have to say, I learned so much, and it helped me write much better grants, having been a grant panel member, because you see everything from the extremely good to the horrific, and you just learn what makes a good grant. So it's brilliant training. So it's really, really good, and you learn a lot of science because you have to read all these grants and all these different subject areas that have to write, you know, the lay one that's more simple and understandable. But your case is, yeah, that's challenging, and that's where maybe having a conversation with the program manager, like you are falling between the divide. Increasingly, the councils want to work together. So it could be that they would say, fine, you know, in your case, let's make sure we go to the EPSRC granting agency and see if they can find a reviewer for us who can provide comments. There's so much, because now all the research councils are working in one place in Swindon, and they're working more and more together. So this is where, again, having that conversation early and expressing that concern, you can flag it and they can make sure, right, when we go out to review, better make sure we've got the right reviewers. Or if we're still unsure as a panel, sometimes we will do cross-panel. So somebody might put something into the physiology board that's a bit sort of, say, on the pain side, because it's a musculoskeletal grant, and then I'll be asked to look at it from a neuroscience perspective because they don't feel quite confident on their panel. So again, having the conversation can help preempt just a mistake happening.
Are you allowed to comment on applications from your own department? So as a council member, are you?
No. I'll go for the designated. Yeah, I'll go. Conflicts of interest is really important.
Yeah.
Really important. Yeah. Laura.
How often panels rely on the suggested reviewers?
On suggested reviews, they do. Yes, they do, because it's really helpful. Because we're so desperate for reviews, and so suggested reviews really important. Put them down. Don't put your mates down, because again, we're not idiots, and the program managers can win in an instant, go on PubMed and see if you've published with them. So then, you know, that's it. So again, it's easy, and again, putting in grants in parallel to different things. These councils talk to each other. So again, we have had situations where people have double dipped. You are not allowed to double dip. You can't put the same grant, you know, in and have funding in one, because they can and they will get access. So again, just be authentic and be honest about it. But suggested reviews is really helpful because it's just really, really hard. They spend an extraordinary amount of their time trying to find reviews. So anything you can do to help them is really helpful. Any other questions at this stage? Okay, so the triage then happens, it's culled down, and then we all gather at a board meeting, pretty much for a day and a half. It's a very intense period of time, and the panel has, we hope, as much expertise around the table to pretty much cover everything that's got coming in. You can go on, again, all this is on their website. You can see all who the panel members are, what their areas of expertise are. And what happens for every grant is that there are 3 what's called DVNs, or designated board members. And they are charged with a subset of those grants that ideally fits their area of expertise. And they basically really get into the detail of those grants and the reviewers. And then at the board meeting, Every grant is discussed for about 5 minutes, pretty much it works out by the time we go through all the grants and all the time and all the other bits we have to discuss, the strategy and things, maybe 10 minutes. And it starts with the first designated board member. So as a person on board, you are given a set of grants where you're DBM1, your DBM2, or your DBM3. And the first person to present is DBM1, and they will speak to the grant. They will say, this grant is about, this is what's brilliant about it, this is what's hopeless about it, this is what the reviewer said. At this point, on the screen, you are revealed who the reviewers are, so you know the name. So if there are these aberrations, you can say, that's why that one gave it a 1 and the other one gave it 6, is because they've had a fight for years and years and we know that. So that sort of thing happens, because politics happen, okay? So you can contextualise the reviews, but at this point everybody's so great with their comments. The reviewers are helpful because what they're good is they help point out maybe things in the methods or a flaw in the concept, or maybe somebody's already done it and they're not going to be as competitive as they thought they were because somebody's actually just published a paper on exactly that thing, and in which case it'd be a waste of money to do it again. And so, sorry, I should have said between triage and here, apologies, after triage you are written to say you've got through triage, here are the reviewer's comments, and you are given about a week to reply to those comments. It is really important you take that process seriously and you address respectfully and appropriately the criticisms. No matter how annoying or stupid the criticisms are, you have to answer them, and answer them appropriately and with respect. Again, this is something in the staff development we will be going through, is how to review in a professional manner, because a big part of our jobs is we review papers, we'll review grants, we'll be reviewing departments and centres. You're going to review a lot, and there's really good ways to positively critique anything, and there's really bad negative ways to do it, and so we want to make sure you are trained how to be critical and objective, but in a respectful and polite manner. So start with this, so you get the opportunity to address. You can put more preliminary data in at this point. And so, really spend time and effort, get other people to read, that response, because that's going to be critical. Because when those reviewers have valid criticisms, which some of them will, if the board members, DBM 1, 2 and 3, don't feel that you've taken that seriously or have not been able to address them, that will sink that grant. So if you can address those criticisms, again, you're just all the time pushing yourself up the ladder. Okay? So that's the process between that and that. Then at the board, DBM1 will present it, say how you handled the criticisms and whether they were convinced you satisfied those criticisms. DBM 2 and 3 will then speak, often for less minutes, because obviously DBM 1's done the majority of the job. And I have to say, it's fairly rare that there'll be disagreement. So even though you do not, and you are not allowed to consult beforehand, as DBM 1, 2 and 3, over any grant, it's done cold, on the fly, at the meeting, so there could be no coffee room discussions about what you're doing. It is of interest to me that my observation is it's very rare we had a real showdown between the DBMs, if I'm honest with you. Generally, if it's a fairly weak one, it's pretty obvious it's weak, and it's not weak, it's all relative at this point, weaker. And so it tends to go along. So, no review process is perfect. I think on the whole the system works reasonably well. But having seen what I've shown you, which is you've got that sort of 50 million requests coming down to 15, again, my other observation is if you haven't got a DBM 1, 2 and 3 who are, really batting for you and supporting that grant, it's basically it's not going to get funded. I mean, you've got to have those people. So it's not a question of buying them out at the pub, it's a question of, you can probably work out from looking at the panel who's likely to be the people to speak to your grant. And again, misconceptions, people think, oh God, I was really rude to them at a thing and they're not going to like me and I'm not going to do it. We're all more professional than that at the end of the day. So don't worry about, again, any of those sides of things. The people on the panel are very professional. They want to make sure that the right grants are funded. And you, again, as part of writing a good grant that's got a good pitch, you need to really make sure that you've got them excited about it, you've convinced them you've got a clear and interesting hypothesis, you've got the right methodology to address it, you're the right person who's got a good track record that has already delivered and proven that you can deliver on things, because if you can convince them, their job is to convince the rest of the panel. So when they've done their pitch, which is a pitch for your grant or not. They then recommend a score. So DBM 1 will say what score they think they should get, DBM 2 and 3 will give it, and then the rest of the panel score blind on these electronic buttons. And all those scores are done per grant throughout the day and a half. And then at the end of that, you put all the scores down and a big red line goes where the money runs out. And then often there's a bit of tinkering, because there's a bit of maybe a little bit of money left over, and you can see where you can try. So the job is to try and maximise this fund as much as you can. So you've got to basically try and get up to high scores at this point. But hopefully you've seen already just with the facts that if you've got through triage, you are fundable. You are writing an excellent grant that is highly fundable. You are there, you are in the running. At that point, you know what, it's just so competitive. And so you can't take it personally if you don't get the grant at this stage. What you should take away is a really positive message that you got through triage and that you're in the fundable range. And then you learn back from your program manager, because you'll be written a fairly, if I'm honest with you, fairly bland, neutral response that won't be too informative about why the grant didn't get funded, but bring up the program manager and just find out, well, what were some of the issues that came out in the conversation around the room. You know, was it really a fundamental flaw in the methodology that you knew really well? Was it really that it's just not, at this point, it's just not a big enough problem or not particularly innovative or exciting? And so you'll be able to get a flavour of where maybe it fell, but at least you know you're in the running, okay? And then you can be an observer at a board meeting. So again, pretty much every board meeting, we will have at least 3 or 4 people from different, often they're MRC Career Development Fellows, or there's somebody who's got, you know, a NERG or something like that. They're fairly new or young, but you would be eligible. That you can write in and say, can I come and just watch? Because watching the process, particularly if you've maybe had a few grants rejected and you're thinking, gee, you know, this is exhausting. And you're feeling, it's all, you know, clearly I'm just awful and I should have stayed in silence. Go, and I promise you, if you watch it, you realise, oh, actually, I don't really well. This is really tough, and actually this is really fair, and they're really thorough, and they really care, and it's not all, you know, politics. It's a really good thing to do, to give you a sort of just a reality check about the process. So go and be an observer. Now the conflict question, and Natalie can ask a kind of question, the conflict issue which Matt asked, is as you're going through each of these grants, already anyway, the programme managers have gone through all the board members, all the grants, and obviously you're not reviewing ones that are from the institution or that you have other collaborative grants on or papers, you declare all your conflicts of interest, and then when you are having a grant discussed that's from your own university, not even your department, just anything from Oxford, you're out the room. So when Chris and I overlapped on board, and quite often, say for Oxford and some of the big, you know, UCL, Oxford, Cambridge, quite often the board's depleted because we're all out the room all the time. Because there's so many grants coming in from these universities, and there's so many panel members from them, you sort of got this mad situation sometimes where, you know, you're quite depleted of who's left in the room because everybody's out of the room. But no, you're out the room while the discussion happens, and then you come back in, and you only know the answer on that final day when the sheet goes up and the red line's drawn, and then you can see where everybody's ended up. So it's very good, and people are really good. I mean, you all go out for dinner the night, nobody talks about grants or anything. It's very, very, very carefully done. Natalie?
Can I actually first start with a question on that? How does that affect the scores if everybody's blind scoring? And for some grants there's 12 people scoring, and for some grants there's 3 people scoring.
It does. So we look at all the different sort of median one, and then we'll look at the variance that was done. So when the line's drawn, you first of all have an average, and then we can look at the median, then we can look whether there's big disparity across the board for scoring. So we'll try and look at
UCL and Oxford will always be at the bottom.
I mean, yeah, people could see that all the time, but we tend to do.
But my serious question was actually, when you were mentioning that there's a little bit of tinkering that can be done, there's a little bit of pot over.
Yeah.
And putting that together with the importance of the reply to criticisms, what would be the advice, and I imagine it's different between Wellcome and MRC and other panels, if a reviewer suggests something or other that you haven't put in your design, and it's not a stupid idea, it's perhaps not something you were thinking of doing, would it then make sense to specifically argue why your design as it is should not be changed versus acknowledging that reviewer's suggestion and saying, oh, you know, that's not a bad idea, we could add an extra control population in, because that's going to change budget. So
you could I've seen situations with both done, and they've both worked in either favourable or unfavourable ways. So it comes down to, again, the specifics of that question. So if the reviewer's comment is really a really good one, and actually this really would fundamentally enhance the outcome and the clarity of the outcome, and that you are able and willing to do it, if there is a budget implication that enhances it, you put that all in on that, and that will be reviewed. Because at the end of the day, we want to fund the best science. And even though we look at the budget, we'll catch up if there's huge consumable costs on travel or whatever. As scientists, we don't really want to care about the money. That's not our job. That's for the program managers and the MRC to worry about. We are just focusing on funding best science. So if we say at board, brilliant, actually this really would make it much better for that particular experiment, and they agree, and they can do it, it's going to cost another 50k, then you would just take that into account. If it turns out that you argue, actually I don't think so, and you haven't convinced the DBMs because they get a sense that you're just saying that because you're stubborn and actually it really is important, of course they might be wrong, the DBMs, and you might be right, but they're going to make the call. So it can go both ways. So you've got to do a good job convincing them of your argument, whether it's in or out. Say, including
But an additional finance implication.
Yeah, they're working
doesn't
out.
actually-
Yeah, they're working out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think I've only got one more. Common mistakes. Oh my God, every single young researcher that's grant flies is because you've got this compulsion to put everything in, including the kitchen sink. And because they think that's going to convince us. I'm going to put everything in to show how wonderful I am, and I can do all these experiments, and I'm going to get loads of data, and that equals good. And it's so sad because often they're brilliant, and one of the experiments was great, but we can't just take one experiment and only fund it. We have the package you sent us. And that is the most common reason a young person's grant fails, is you put too much in. Because actually it takes a skill and a confidence to say, one idea, one experiment, that's what I'm doing. And it takes quite a lot of nerve to hang everything on one big idea. And so the temptation when you're young and still finding your way and a bit in sort of nervous and insecure is to say, well, I better put off and do this, and this, and this, and this. So they don't like that, they might like that. Just don't do that, okay? So that's the most common reason. And another thing that is disappointing, which links to that, is the reason you've gone all the way through to actually submitting a grant with the kitchen sink in, is because you have not taken advantage of older people in the department who've been round the rounds and sort of know what we're doing and getting feedback. So if one of your senior mentors gives you a face like that, that's meant to be Socrates, you know you probably haven't written a very good grant. So again, preparation is everything. So if you fail to prepare to fail, is the old SAS saying. So, you know, make sure you allow enough time that you have got the grant to a level of evolution such that you've given, you know, people like me or your senior supervisors or line managers time to comment on it. And we will soon be able to say to you, slash that, go in with this one. This is the exciting thing, this is the thing you should be doing. For goodness sake, please. In fact, it gets so bad at MRC, we were going to write letters to every head of department around the country to say, get your house in order and stop sending grants in from your young people. It's wasting their time, it's wasting your time, it's wasting our time. Because you clearly haven't read it, and you clearly haven't advised them on their grant. And that's just terribly, unfortunately, they're going to get the big rejection, and that's not good. Everybody's wasting a lot of time, and it all could have been prevented because of better training. Hence why we're doing things like this, and we'll continue with these things and drop it in. But take advantage of people who you know have been successful and get them to read your grant. It is very, very rare that any of us, and Heidi will support me, we all are here to support you. It's very rare somebody's going to say, no, I haven't got time, I don't want to do that. We're all busy, but we will, as best we can, help you. So don't not ask because you're nervous that we might say no. We just won't, right? Or we'll find somebody to help if we're just busy ourselves. Okay? So common mistakes. So those that Masood and Heidi will detail in. And don't take it personally. You will. You know, 9 times out of 10 you're going to get rejected. And it really hurts. It still hurts when you don't get that grant or that paper. And it is. But you've just got to realise, which is why go to the board and see the process, help depersonalise it. It means you know it's actually more about you. And I have to say women are much worse at this than the men. And men will just sort of get up and go around. The women do tend to take it a lot more personally. It isn't about you. It's not a reflection on you. because you don't know what the conversation was, and generally the conversation was, they're brilliant, they're young, they're the future leader, they're fantastic, but this grant's, got the kitchen sink in it, it's not going to work, it's not going to fail it. But all you get is the rejections. Oh my God, I'm not going to make it, I'm a failure. Don't, okay? So hopefully just demystifying the process will help you understand. Rejection is a big part of this job, but you've got to learn to deal with it. So you've got to learn to, sorry about these very corny pictures I found on the internet, but I thought it was really cute. So you've just got to pick yourself up and carry on. Yeah, that was really cool, that one. But learn where you went wrong. Get on the phone, find out from the project manager what happened. Show your grant to somebody and say, I didn't get it, I got through triage, or I didn't get through triage, why do you think I went wrong? And learn, and go again. Try again, because you'll hone it, okay? I think that's all I have. So we've had a few questions, but I've got a few minutes before we hand over. So have I any more immediate questions? Yeah, Natalie?
There's none.
Yeah.
Wait, at the beginning, you were saying something important about, let me write it, I wrote it down. In the key elements of success and such, how to mention properly now or never thing.
Yeah.
That seems to me extraordinarily difficult
Without
either begging or coming across super arrogant.
Yeah. So you don't say it, but again, this is grantsmanship. And so often I'll say to people in my there's the difference between, to a certain extent, obviously what you do is what you said on the grant, but how you phrase what you're going to do on the grant is grantsmanship. Mm-hmm. So, and that's just a skill that you learn is how to make the pitch. So you won't go out and say, if you don't fund it now, you've missed the opportunity NRC and you'll look full next year, where egg on your face when Harvard publishes it and Britain could have had it. No, that's not the way to phrase it. But what you could say is, you take imaging. We had to make this argument, didn't we? As part of all the welcome bit is that the UK happens to be brilliant at neuroimaging. We happen to have two of the world's leading imaging centres in London and here. You don't penalise Britain for that. You want to make sure we maintain our world leading position. So rather than funding only one or the other, fund both. Because actually we're that good. So you have to make the case that you are excellent at what you're doing. You are at this point at the leading edge of it. There is competition in another, but at this point you've got the competitive edge. And this will take you to the next level. So you subtly put it in those terms that again is just a more it's not a cunning, but there's an element of manipulation. You have to it's a spin, it's a pitch, it's a sales pitch. You're selling your science. I think that's the best way to put it. And you've got to do it in, again, a respectful manner, but you do want to give them a sense, if it is the case, that there is a chase on. The most obvious one is when somebody's trying to clone a gene. That's the simplest one. It's harder in neuroscience because it tends to be a little less on there. But cloning a gene, you have the first group to clone it or you're not. It's really binary. And so that would be a more simple example to say, we are at this point closer than we know in the world from anybody else, but there are 3 other big groups chasing it. And if you don't, this piece of grant now will enable us to develop that new technology that's going to give us that edge, and we think we'll have it. And they know if they don't fund that now, and you're a really great group to do it, these other groups will obviously go ahead and do it, and then we've missed the boat and not been the one to fund it. And they want kudos, obviously. They want to be the councils that are funding the most innovative, world-leading science. So you've got to persuade them that where you're at in that program of research is at the leading edge, but you need more to keep going. But you've got competition, so you phrase it more like that. But not all science is like that, because sometimes it isn't. It's just a question that, so that's just one element of it, yeah? Yes?
Have you got any advice about how to achieve a good balance between an ambitious grant that's exciting, but one that's actually achievable within the time frame? And should you ever try to suggest that you can achieve things more quickly than perhaps you can?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 things to unpack there. One is just the kitchen sink thing. So ambitious that some people are just extraordinarily capable of doing an awful lot in a short period of time. So you have to convince them. I'd do 2 things. One, I'd say, I realise this is highly ambitious, and it looks like, you can say kitchen sink, but there's a very ambitious set of research to complete in the time. I'd like to persuade you that I'm capable of delivering on it for these reasons. And then you give an example that in the previous few years you've done that thing. So that would be one way to handle it. Then there's the sort of ambitious in that it's blue sky, it might not work, it's so out there, you know, on the sort of edge of innovation that it just might not work out. And although they want to fund really innovative blue sky science as well, there's a balance between, again, it's not this sort of an edge, you know, and again, you'll have half the panel will be on one side and half will be on the other. And some will say it's too high risk, it's just too risky, and others will say, yeah, take the risk and go with it. And that will just come down to the wonderful organic nature of the committee, which can be highly unpredictable. So you want to, I would say, it's always nice if there is some real innovation there and something that is, you know, a little bit risky. I think most of us tend to want to see that. Some will like more of it. I'm quite a high risk, fund it and see type person. Others more conservative. So knowing that, again, it comes down to personalities who are making those decisions around the panel, you are going to have a range of people from the high risk end to the absolute conservative. I just want to do the safe science that's building blocks to here to there. So you've got to find a balance between the two and speak to the two communities. So it's known as psychology of the panel a bit.
Speaking about the preliminary data, because usually you already need money for it, sometimes with an ethical approval, so it's quite hard to get it.
Yeah, it is, you're right. But you'll find you just have to be creative about what your preliminary data is. So if you really, you're right at the start and you're going to move into a completely new area, that you don't have any preliminary data in that area. So say that, if you don't mind, I'll take Anina as an example. So she started doing some wrist imaging with us on our second test. And let's imagine you were putting a grant in, like you did for the job fell, right, to get a wrist coil. We didn't have any preliminary data at that point in time, but what Anina did have was data to show that she actually has done a lot of peripheral nerves, she knows what she's doing. We've obviously got data now that we know what we're doing with the imaging. None of us had data imaging peripherally because we don't do the peripheral thing. So that was an internal fund. Would that have got funded at MRC? Probably not, because it would have been just a little bit too early. So what we would have done, and like we did, the strategy was you go for something internal, you get like a coil, you get some preliminary data, now we've got some, got a nice paper, come out with it, and then we'll go, now you could go into MRC and say, okay, we can do it. We've got this, we've got data, we've got a paper, you know, it's a mission. So you build it that way. So it's a question of, again, knowing when to go in to these councils where you're going in with the big boys and girls. Yes, at that point, you've got in Oxford a wonderful opportunity to practice, to go for smaller grants, equipment grants, startup grants, John Fell ones. You know, we'll try and do some more with the department to still get the finances settled, but I'm hoping to have some grants that again you can practice on internally to go for. And that's where you can just get a little bit of seed, get going, help seed something, and then you go to the bigger one. But it's really hard on that perimeter.